Long before concrete towers scraped the sky, when humanity felt the pulse of the earth and the whisper of the unseen, the relationship between people and plants was an act of deep respect. It wasn't about consumption or escape. It was a sacred dialogue, a partnership between body, spirit, and the living world. In those ancient times, certain plants were understood not just as life forms, but as gateways. And cannabis was one such gateway. But a gateway doesn't only open into realms of light. It can just as easily lead down shadowed alleys, into the unseen corners of the soul. At the core of this exploration lies a question seldom asked with true seriousness. Beyond the science, beyond the law, beyond the fleeting high, what are the spiritual implications of smoking marijuana? We're stepping away from government mandates, mainstream scientific consensus, and the pop culture narrative that elevates it as a symbol of easy rebellion. Our search leads us into the ancient wisdom streams, through the lines between the sacred texts, and into the insights of those mystics who dared to look beyond the smoke. Prepare for a journey that crosses ages and continents, drawing threads from the Vedic hymns of ancient India, the esoteric circles of Alexandria, the vibrant ceremonies of the Rastafari, and the profound insights of African spiritual masters. This isn't about judgment, it's about revelation. Cannabis, a plant today debated, commercialized, even glamorized. Yet, for countless generations, it was a sacred key. And keys, let's remember, are not meant to be idolized. They are forged to unlock doors. But what doors does this key truly open? In the mists of ancient India, the Vedas spoke of it as a divine gift, one of 5 sacred plants bestowed upon humanity, a bringer of Amesha spenta, the elixir of immortality. Its connection to Shiva, the dancer of cosmic dissolution and creation, is not accidental. Shiva embodies the force that dissolves illusion, clearing the path for renewal. His devotees, the sadhus, used it in their deep meditations, often consumed from clay pipes during periods of intense discipline, fasting, chanting, solitude. Their aim wasn't pleasure, it was the dissolution of the ego, a profound shedding of identification with the physical form. Cannabis, for them, wasn't an escape from reality, but a confrontation with the nature of reality itself. Across Asia, Taoist sages recognized the plant's power to enhance longevity and sharpen spiritual vision. Early alchemical texts, like those attributed to Ge Hong, describe potent mixtures involving cannabis alongside herbs like ginseng, intended to induce lucid states and expand inner awareness. In Taoism, the universal energy, Qi, flows through everything. Cannabis, when aligned with a balanced system, could harmonize this flow, but in an unbalanced state, it could chaos. It acts as an amplifier, and an amplifier is dangerous if the instrument it's connected to is out of tune. Moving westward, certain Sufi orders in the medieval Arab world incorporated the plant, particularly hashish, into their devotional practices. For the Sufis, the ultimate quest was fana, the annihilation of the personal self in the ecstatic presence of the divine. Many accounts speak of visions of the beloved, of moments of intense mystical union. Yet, even amongst these illuminated souls, debate existed. The renowned mystic Rumi questioned the practice, asking, "Why seek the beloved in intoxication? Is he not already dancing within you, perfectly sober?" The plant was used sparingly, with immense reverence. The moment it stopped being a ladder and became a crutch, it was often set aside. Amongst the mystical traditions of the Kabbalah, direct references to cannabis are scarce, perhaps due to the cultural landscape or a profound caution. Yet, a fundamental wisdom echoes through their teachings. The Zohar, a central text, warns explicitly about those who attempt to force open the gates of light without proper preparation. They risk being swallowed by their own ignorance. In contemporary terms, without genuine spiritual groundwork, any substance intended to open awareness can quickly become a subtle trap for the ego. In the traditions descending from Gnosticism and the ancient Essenes, archaeological insights, particularly studies by researchers like Raphael Mikulam and Sula Bene, suggest the presence of cannabinoid resins in sacred anointing oils and temple incenses. Some scholars even propose that the Kane balsam mentioned in the Old Testament, used in sacred blends, was cannabis. But again, this was not casual use. It was part of ritual, of liturgy intended to facilitate prophetic states. Used outside this sacred context, the plant was deemed profane. In the vibrant shamanic traditions of Africa and the Americas, from the Congo to the Amazon, there is a deep, inherent reverence for power plants. Cannabis, where present, is treated with the same profound respect as ayahuasca, mapacho, sacred tobacco, or peyote. The understanding is clear. It's not merely the plant's chemistry that facilitates healing or vision. It's the spirit of the plant, and that spirit will not reveal itself without honor. In practices like candomblé and umbanda, Afro-diasporic religions deeply connected to nature, the concept of IXA, vital, impersonal spiritual energy, is central. Every plant possesses its unique AXA, its vibration, its sacred purpose. To use a plant without understanding or honoring its AXA is like striking a sacred drum without knowing which orisha you are calling forth. Even in the relatively modern tradition of the Rastafari, where cannabis known as ganja is revered as the herb of wisdom, its use is embedded in liturgy. It is consumed during reasoning sessions, gatherings dedicated to spiritual reflection, chanting, prayer, and meditation. The herb is a sacrament, not simply a means to pass the time. Across all these diverse traditions, a common thread emerges. Cannabis is potential, and potential is fundamentally neutral. It can be a lift or a fall, a valuable tool or a disabling crutch, a genuine portal or a gilded cage. What determines its effect is not the plant itself, but the user, their state of consciousness, their intention, their level of preparation. As the Hermetic teachings remind us, the spirit does not yield to those who knock at the door while drunk on their own self-importance. Those who seek truth via perceived shortcuts may only find themselves walking in a vicious circle. Ultimately, the question shifts from, is cannabis sacred? To, are you sacred enough to engage with its power? Any plant capable of opening portals also functions as a mirror, and mirrors, contrary to our comfortable illusions, do not always reflect beauty. Sometimes they starkly reveal what we've spent lifetimes avoiding. Cannabis, like many plant teachers, possesses a unique ability to dissolve our masks, but not every soul is truly ready to gaze upon its own face, stripped bare of all artifice. This is where the plant's most profound spiritual work often begins, not in the initial ascent, but in the inevitable confrontation. Carl Jung, the architect of analytical psychology, illuminated the concept of the shadow, the accumulation of every aspect of ourselves we have repressed, denied, or feared. Not inherently evil, but simply everything the ego refuses to integrate. Hidden fears, buried traumas, forbidden desires, ancestral pain. Jung argued that confronting this shadow is the essential first step towards psychological and spiritual wholeness. Is it not telling that so many people upon consuming marijuana experience sudden anxiety, paranoia, or a raw sense of internal exposure? The plant isn't creating these states. It's simply peeling away the protective varnish of the persona. What surges to the surface is what has resided there all along. In the realm of occult traditions, this phenomenon is understood. Dion Fortune, in Psychic Self-Defense, described how altered states, whether induced by ritual, substances, or trauma, can thin the etheric field, leaving an individual vulnerable to subtle external influences. She cautioned that when consciousness wavers, energies from lower regions may be drawn in, feeding on the emotional breaches left exposed. This isn't mere superstition. It's a description of subtle psychodynamics. When the analytical conscious mind steps back, through sleep, deep meditation, or cannabis, the unconscious comes forward. If that unconscious is a storehouse of unhealed wounds, they will find their voice. What gets labeled a bad trip is, more often than not, the spirit's sometimes violent attempt at internal cleansing. The tradition of Raja Yoga, particularly in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, addresses this with remarkable clarity. Patanjali notes that extraordinary powers, siddhis, can spontaneously arise, even through the use of herbs. Yet, he issues a stern warning. These powers are illusory if not grounded in discernment and ethical practice. Worse, he states, siddhis can become significant obstacles on the path to true enlightenment, samadhi, precisely because they inflate the spiritual ego, a trap even more insidious than the ordinary one. Osho, known for challenging conventional views, spoke profoundly on drugs and spirituality. He observed that substances can indeed open doors that, ideally, only profound silence should open. They offer a shortcut, yes, but an inherently unstable one. Often those who rush through these doors without a map or guide find themselves returning the same way, only now utterly disoriented about their true spiritual location. On an energetic level, cannabis interacts directly with the subtle body, the energy field that surrounds and permeates us. Practitioners of energy work, Reiki, Kundalini yoga, ceremonial magic, often report a heightened sensitivity in their auric field post-use. This can be a gift if the person is firmly grounded, but if they are unmoored, they become like a lighthouse beacon without a captain at the helm, radiating energy that attracts not just light seekers, but also energetic predators or unwanted influences. Some Amazonian shamans offer a simple, potent truth. Every plant that opens is a plant that tests, and the test is not cosmic, it is moral. What will you do with what you see? Will you retreat? Will you analyze endlessly? Or will you act? Many who use cannabis habitually report a persistent feeling of stagnation. The body relaxes, yes, but the soul feels tethered. Creativity may seem to flow freely in thought, yet rarely solidifies into tangible action. Spirituality feels deep in the moment, but seems to produce no lasting, concrete transformation in daily life. Kabbalah describes this state with the concept of klipoth, energetic shells or husks, layers formed by unintegrated perceptions, mystical glimpses that weren't digested, accumulating like spiritual dust bunnies. They create the illusion of upward movement without any actual ascent. The greatest danger lies precisely here, confusing the feeling of expansion with genuine spiritual evolution. Expansion without a clear direction, without grounded integration, is merely swelling, and swelling eventually bursts. At this point, cannabis, when divorced from conscious intention or used excessively, ceases to be a sacred plant and becomes, perhaps, the plant of stagnation, not inherently by its nature, but by the nature of its disconnected use. It doesn't magically create spiritual passivity, but it can become the perfect framework for someone who already carries that tendency within. Some might argue, but I feel peace when I use it. That proves it's working. But peace derived solely from an external agent is like finding calm in a room with the doors locked. It feels secure, but it is artificial. True peace is resilient. It can arise even amidst the storms of chaos because it is rooted deep within the core of being. If cannabis brings you peace, ask yourself, is it teaching you to cultivate that peace from within, or is it merely renting you a temporary, fleeting illusion? The authentic encounter with the divine path almost invariably begins with the stark encounter with the shadow, and that meeting is seldom picturesque. There are no soft focus filters, no easy rainbows. There can be tears, shame, anger, confusion. But if you have the courage to remain present in that space, breathing, attentive, something profound occurs. Not a sudden, dazzling hallucination, but a quiet, steady integration. An acceptance of what is, and from that acceptance, the true birthing of what can become. Cannabis, in this demanding context, is like a mirror crafted from water. It can reflect the boundless sky above, but if you plunge into it carelessly, you'll see nothing but the disturbed emerald below. The human spirit, in truth, never walks alone. The inner path, however solitary it may feel, always vibrates as an echo of the collective tapestry to which we belong. No spiritual practice, no plant teacher, no moment of insight exists in isolation. Everything that touches us ripples outward through our culture, and everything our culture embraces or discards fundamentally shapes how we engage with ourselves and the sacred. Cannabis stands as a powerful illustration of this. A plant with profound mystical origins, transformed in mere decades into a global commodity, a pop culture icon, a political talking point, and a symbol of youthful, often shallow, rebellion. Yet, long before the debates of legalization or the policies of prohibition, it was woven into the sacred fabric of communities, and in certain places, it still holds that charge. Consider the Rastafari tradition. Ganja is not an addiction, it is a vow, a covenant with the divine. Originating in the 1930s Jamaica, the Rastafari movement arose as a profound resistance to colonialism and oppression, yes, but also as a spiritual reawakening rooted in African heritage, the Bible, and a distinct worldview. For the Rastas, the herb embodies the prophecy. The herb is the healing of the nations, from the Book of Revelation. Smoking it is a sacrament, a deliberate act to draw nearer to Jah, their name for the immanent, living God. There is no casualness here. There is deep reverence. The reasoning sessions, where ganja is shared collectively amidst philosophical and spiritual discussion, are liturgical acts. There is silence, listening, spoken word, and the shared smoke. They walk together. The collective gathering is the cathedral, and the plant is the incense of the spirit. But this isn't unique to the Rastas. Across the African continent, within numerous Bantu traditions, for example, historical evidence points to the ritual use of cannabis in significant life events, celebrations, funerals, rites of passage. It wasn't used to escape pain, but to find the strength to move through it. It was presence, not absence. An invocation of the ancestors, not alienation from self or community. In the Americas before the arrival of Europeans, while cannabis wasn't indigenous, the use of psychoactive plants in collective ritual was widespread and central. The principle remains consistent. Substances that open portals, but only when supported by a rich cosmology, shared myths, established rituals, and the guidance of experienced practitioners, a symbolic collective structure. Outside of this container, the plant becomes desacralized. It reduces to mere chemical stimulation. And this is precisely what modernity has done. It has yanked the plant out of the temple and tossed it onto the shelves of the cultural supermarket. It has morphed it into a meme, a product, an aesthetic statement. What was once a sacrament became marketing. What was once a sacred vehicle became a brand. The countercultural movements of the 1960s attempted to recapture that lost ritual value, but often they did so without the anchors, without the deep roots, without established lineage, without proper initiation or guidance. People might have listened to Alan Watts and Timothy Leary, experimenting with cannabis alongside other substances and political activism. There was a genuine hunger for transcendence, yes, but it was often fragmented, untethered. Aldous Huxley, reflecting on his mescaline experiences in The Doors of Perception, had already foreseen this, warning that the visionary experience may reveal truths, but it does not teach. It shows glimpses, but it does not provide the structure needed for lasting change. The danger lies in mistaking the temporary glimpse for permanent realization. Western culture, in its rush to dismantle tradition, created a perilous vacuum, spirituality detached from ritual, intense experience divorced from ethics, fleeting ecstasy without the discipline of integration, sudden insights without the hard work of action. Cannabis, within this cultural void, became primarily a symbol of counterculture, rebellion, individual freedom, almost never one of spiritual responsibility. This is why, in traditions that still hold it sacred, its use is fundamentally collective. The group acts as the vital container, the compass, the witness. In many Afro-Amerindian ceremonies, for instance, the plant is almost never engaged with alone. There are shared chants, instruments, cycles of cleansing, established boundaries. The collective energy sustains the sacred space. The individual dissolves, not into isolation, but into the communal flow, to be reborn within the group. And here we circle back to a fundamental truth. Cannabis possesses a cultural soul. It carries the energetic imprint of every narrative it has been wrapped in. Used within the temple walls, surrounded by reverence and clear intent, it can function as a sacrament. Smoked alone in the dim light of anxious solitude, it tends to amplify disconnection. It is as adaptable as water, taking the form of the vessel it occupies. And the vessel of much of modern culture is shallow, frantic, cynical. The herb once invoked to commune with gods is now fodder for sitcoms and Netflix plots. The hemp of knowledge has been reduced to marketing jargon, a cheap joke, a designer rebellion. Yet, there is resistance. In indigenous communities fiercely protecting their traditions from spiritual extractivism, in young seekers who are rediscovering the power of ritual, of fasting, of communal song, in the silent masters who, even amidst urban clamor, teach the practice of smoking in prayer. The plant itself remains unchanged. What is utterly transformed is the context, the intention, the symbolic field that sustains the experience. And perhaps deep down, that is its most crucial lesson. Spirituality is not merely an individual sensation, it is a collective frequency. It's not just what you feel, but what you generate, not what you see under the plant's influence, but who you become after that influence fades. As an old African proverb wisely states, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go in a circle. Bring the drum, bring the fire, bring the plant, yes, but bring the community, the context. True spirituality is not measured by the temporary altered states you experience, but by the sustained elevated states you embody in your daily life. The path forward isn't illuminated solely by the inner lights you perceive, but by how you integrate and work with the shadows those lights inevitably cast. Between the brilliance and the fog, there exists a razor-thin line. Its name is discernment. Cannabis, like all plant teachers, arrives without promises. It carries only possibilities that can lead to profound illumination or deep confusion, genuine inspiration or spiritual numbness. And it is here that the sincere spiritual seeker stands at a crucial crossroads. Are they seeking to expand consciousness or merely to escape from the discomfort of their current state? Osho, often misinterpreted, offered a truth of profound simplicity. Anything can become a meditation if you approach it with present awareness, and anything can degrade into a mere drug if you engage with it in absence. The core issue isn't the plant itself, it is the level of consciousness that accompanies its use. When presence is lacking, the path doesn't progress. It simply spins like a carousel. This is precisely why the ancients, with their deep intuitive wisdom, always surrounded the use of sacred plants with rigorous rituals, fasting, chanting, periods of silence, careful preparation, and, crucially, the guidance of experienced initiates. This wasn't born of superstition, but of an innate understanding of energetic hygiene. They knew, in a way we have largely forgotten, that a portal is not a casual tourist destination. It is a place of intense passage, and not every soul is ready for what lies on the other side. Discernment, called crisis in Greek philosophy, viveka in Vedanta, is the invisible blade that separates the truly real from mere passing sensation. It is the eye of the middle way, the third eye, understood not as a paranormal power, but as an inner compass. Without this vital compass, when engaging with cannabis for spiritual insight, what feels like profound enlightenment might be nothing more than simple hypersensitivity. What feels like a powerful vision might be just a mental echo, a reverberation of subconscious material. What feels like pure intuition might be a cleverly disguised desire of the ego. There is a form of intoxication that feels intoxicatingly clear. It can bring dazzling insights, moments of synesthesia, perceived synchronicities that feel profoundly meaningful. But if these insights do not fundamentally alter your relationship with others, with the world around you, with your own shadow, then they are, sadly, just spiritual fireworks. Beautiful, maybe memorable, but ultimately aimless. The true spiritual path is often far less dramatic, far more arid in its external appearance. It demands consistency. It demands presence without requiring spectacle. It demands cultivating inner silence, not just the absence of external noise. And this is precisely why cannabis, when used outside a structured, disciplined path, can foster an addiction far more insidious than the chemical reliance, the addiction to the feeling of being spiritual without the dedicated practice of spirituality itself. It is relatively easy to seem profound under the plant's influence. It is infinitely harder to be profound while stuck in traffic, standing in line at the bank, or navigating a painful conflict with someone you care about. Enlightenment is not measured by the visions you see with your eyes closed. It is measured by what you do with your eyes open, your feet firmly planted and dirty upon the ground of ordinary life. And when discernment is absent, cannabis risks becoming a fogged mirror, where the ego congratulates itself on being awakened, when in reality it merely took a comfortable nap in the lap of fleeting sensations, a kind of vegetative peace that ultimately paralyzes more than it liberates. Traditional occultism speaks of the false light of Hod, a deceptive sensation of mental clarity that is merely the mind intoxicated by unintegrated images, a surface brilliance utterly lacking in roots. Cannabis, engaged with without wisdom, can feed precisely this illusion, the feeling of soaring progress while merely circling, perhaps in increasingly colorful patterns, but always returning to the same point. This is why, spiritually speaking, the plant should ideally only be approached when the inner soil has been tended, when there is genuine inner cleanliness, a clear and honest intention, a capacity for true silence before the encounter, and, perhaps even more critically, a deeper silence afterward for integration, when there is guidance, tradition, method, and profound humility. And above all, when one is truly ready to receive the answer it offers, even if that answer is difficult. For, as the Sufi master Hafiz wisely said, God is like a mirror. He does not laugh at your grimaces. He simply shows them clearly. Does cannabis possess spiritual potential? Yes. But all potential demands context, discipline, clear intention, and deep understanding. When it is stripped bare of its ritual function and trivialized into a cultural commodity, it stands in great danger of becoming just another sophisticated form of distraction. Authentic spiritual seeking is a delicate, subtle art. It is not about escaping, it is about standing firm. It is not merely about seeing lights, it is about becoming light. What is it you are truly seeking when you light that flame? Is it peace, space, a moment of silence? If these are qualities you cannot cultivate from within, perhaps the plant is merely holding up a mirror, and mirrors, beautiful as they are, can only ever show the reflection. If this exploration resonated with something deep inside you, please consider sharing it. Share it with someone who is searching not just for smoke, but for clarity, for truth, for genuine depth. Thank you for watching.